Hello everyone, welcome to your own YouTube channel Shantanu's Bioprep Life Science. Today we are going to start with Biochemistry unit. Chapter is Metabolic Pathway, and this is the first introductory lecture video of Metabolic Pathways chapter, that is Introduction to Metabolism. In this lecture we will clear all the concepts and basics so that it will be easier for you to understand further metabolic pathways in carbohydrate, lipid and nucleic acid metabolism. Okay, so starting with the definition of metabolism. You won't get any question from definition, but we have to understand it. Okay, metabolism is defined as a series of chemical reactions which are interconnected and occur within a cell in order to maintain life is known as metabolism, and such pathway is known as metabolic pathway or metabolic map. All the interconnected chemical reactions which occur in a cell and which are essential to maintain or sustain life are known as metabolic pathway. For example, glycolysis. Glycolysis is a type of linear metabolic pathway. It consists of 10 steps. So it is a series of interconnected chemical reactions. Okay. And we know that complete oxidation of glucose will involve glycolysis, Krebs cycle, oxidative phosphorylation, and then we will get energy in the form of ATP. So energy is very much essential for the living beings to survive. Without energy, we cannot survive. So all those chemical reactions which are interconnected and occurs within a cell to maintain or sustain life is known as metabolism, and such pathways are known as metabolic pathways or metabolic map. Okay, very easy. Next point is metabolic pathways can be divided into 4 types: linear, cyclic, spiral, branch. The best example of linear type of metabolic pathway is glycolysis. Best example of cyclic type of metabolic pathway is Krebs cycle or TCA cycle. Best example of spiral type of metabolic pathway is biosynthesis of fatty acid. And the types of branch type of metabolic pathway can be divided into 2 subcategories, that is branch divergent type. Example is penicillin biosynthesis. Second type is branch convergent type. Example is amino acid biosynthesis. So there are lot many examples, but I have only mentioned single example for each of the type of metabolic pathway because you won't get any question from here and it's not much important. Okay, to know all the metabolic types, all the metabolic pathways which belong to which type of metabolic pathway, it's not very much important. Okay, now we will understand each type of metabolic pathway in detail, starting with the linear type of metabolic pathway. Okay, so as we can see, initial substrate A is getting converted into final product D in 3 steps. First step A to B, second step B to C, third step C to D. For each step there will be a specific or separate or distinct enzyme. So each step will be catalyzed by a specific enzyme. For A to B there is first enzyme, for B to C there will be second enzyme, for C to D there will be third enzyme. Each step will be catalyzed by a specific enzyme. Now there are 2 very important terms to understand: metabolites and intermediates. Metabolites means all those things which are present in a metabolic pathway are known as metabolites. So A, B, C, D, everything will be known as metabolites. And intermediate means except initial substrate and final product, what all things that are present in the metabolic pathway are known as intermediate. Except initial substrate and final product. So except A and D, whatever is left in the metabolic pathway is known as intermediate. So B and C will be intermediate. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. Cyclic metabolic pathway. In this we can see A is getting converted into A because it is cyclic. Here initial substrate is also A, final product is also A. This is a 3-step of cyclic metabolic pathway. A to B, B to C, C to A. Here also each step will be catalyzed by a specific enzyme or separate enzyme or distinct enzyme. For A to B, first enzyme. For B to C step, second enzyme. For C to A, third enzyme. Again, we will understand what are the metabolites and intermediates in this metabolic pathway. So as discussed before, all those things which are present in the metabolic pathway are known as metabolites. So A, B, C are known as metabolites. Except initial substrate and final products, what all things that are present, all those things that are present in the metabolic pathway are known as intermediates. So except A, that is initial substrate and final product, B and C, which are left in the metabolic pathway, are known as intermediates of the given metabolic pathway. Okay. Now let us study spiral type of metabolic pathway. Here we can observe that initial substrate is A, it is getting converted into B, B is getting converted into C, C is getting converted into D, D is getting converted into A dash. Again A dash will get converted into B dash, B dash will get converted into C dash, C dash will get converted into D dash, and D dash will get converted into A dash. Okay. The minor difference here is that same enzyme E1 is catalyzing 2 steps. It can catalyze A to B also and A dash to B dash also. So in spiral type of metabolic pathway, one enzyme can catalyze more than one step. But in linear and cyclic type of metabolic pathway, one enzyme can catalyze only one step, or each step is catalyzed by a single enzyme or specific enzyme. Okay. So here, same enzyme can catalyze different steps or reactions, unlike other types of metabolic pathway. Okay. Now let us understand, or let us find out what are the metabolites and intermediates. So metabolites will be everything that is present in the metabolic pathway. A, B, C, D, A dash, B dash, C dash, D dash. All are known as metabolites. Except initial substrate and final product. So except A and A dash. Everything which is present is known as intermediate. Are known as intermediates. B, C, D, B dash, C dash, D dash. All will be known as intermediates of this metabolic pathway. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now let us look at branch type of metabolic pathway. First we will look branch divergent type. Okay. Here there is one initial substrate A and 2 final products D and F. Okay. The metabolite B can favor upper metabolic pathway, or it can also favor below metabolic pathway. So B can enter above metabolic pathway, or it can enter below metabolic pathway. So it can enter 2 different pathways. It depends on the amount of enzyme 2 and enzyme 4. So the decision of B to enter or to favor above pathway or to favor below pathway depends on the amount of enzyme, here E2 and E4. If the amount of enzyme E2 is high, B will favor above metabolic pathway, that is B will get converted into C, C will get converted into D. If the amount of enzyme E4, increase, B will follow below metabolic pathway, B will get converted into E, E will get converted into F. And if we look at the metabolites, A, B, C, D, E, F are known as metabolites. And except initial substrate and final products, that is except A, D and F, whatever is left, that is B, C, E, they will be known as intermediates. Okay. Now let us look at branch convergent type. As the name suggests, starting with 2 initial substrates, at later stage they will converge together and to give rise to a single product. And that is what happening over here. as we can observe that there are two initial substrates A and X, and later they are converging and giving rise to a single end product. Okay, so A and X are two initial substrate and R is final product. Later they will converge and give rise to a single end product. If we look at the metabolites, they will be A, B, C, Q, R, X, Y, Z, everything. Intermediate means except initial substrate and final product. So except A, X and R, whatever is left are known as intermediates. So B, C, Q, Y and Z will be known as intermediates in this given metabolic pathway. Okay. So I also mentioned trick here. The first point says everything in the metabolic pathway is known as metabolite. So metabolite will contain initial substrate also, intermediates also, and final product also. The second point, except initial substrate and final product, everything in the metabolic pathway is known as intermediate of that metabolic pathway. We have discussed these 2 points in detail in each of the type of metabolic pathway. Okay, I hope it's very much clear right now. So let us solve one question. It is very basic and very easy question now for you. In the given in the below pathway, identify metabolite and intermediate respectively from the given options. Okay, so I have drawn linear metabolic pathway for you, and we know that everything in the metabolic pathway is metabolite, and except initial substrate and final product, whatever is left in the metabolic pathway will be intermediate. So metabolites will be A, B, C, D, and intermediate will be except A and D, what is left, that is B and C. So B and C will be intermediate. So the correct option should be E. Okay. Moving on to next question. Okay. You can pause the video and try to solve it on your own. And if you are unable to solve it, you can resume the video and watch my explanation. Okay, let us start. Now I will draw one linear metabolic pathway for you, and we will try to deduce things from there. So here is linear type of metabolic pathway of 3 steps, where A is getting converted into D in 3 steps. In 3 steps. If there are 3 steps, there will be 3 enzymes, because each step is catalyzed by a separate or specific enzyme. So 3 steps will have 3 different enzymes. Number of metabolites will be 4. Which are they? A, B, C and D. There are 2 intermediates, B and C, except initial substrate A and final product D. What are left? B and C. So they will be known as intermediates. We can deduce one thing from here. Number of steps equal to number of enzymes. There were 3 steps and there were 3 enzymes involved. So we can say that number of steps equal to number of enzymes. Number of steps plus 1, that is 3 steps plus 1, we are getting 4 metabolites. So steps plus 1, we are getting number of metabolites. Number of steps minus 1, we are getting number of intermediates. That is 3 steps minus 1, we are getting 2 intermediates. So I have just deduced this information just from this simple linear metabolic pathway. Now we can easily solve our question. In the question it is given that number of steps are 14. If there are 14 steps, there will be 14 different enzymes because each step will be catalyzed by a specific enzyme. 14 plus 1. Number of metabolites will be 50. Steps plus 1. Number of intermediates will be steps minus 1. From this information, 13 intermediates. And number of how many intermediates will be formed is asked. So there will be total 13 intermediates in the linear type of metabolite in the linear metabolic pathway consisting of 14 steps. So the correct option is B, that is 13. Okay. So I have mentioned a trick for you. Number of steps equal to number of enzymes involved because each step or reaction will be catalyzed by a specific or separate enzyme. Number of steps plus 1 equal to number of metabolites. Number of steps minus 1 equal to number of intermediates. As we have deduced this information from this simple linear metabolic pathway. So you can also remember this trick, or you can draw simple linear metabolic pathway and you can deduce all the things which I have mentioned over here. Okay, the task will get easy rather than remembering all this or memorizing all these tricks. Okay, now we will solve another question. In a cyclic metabolic pathway, if initial substrate is converted into a product in 18 steps, how many metabolites will be formed? Now again, we will draw a simple cyclic type of metabolic pathway. A is getting converted into A in 3 steps, A to B, B to C, C to A, 3 steps. There will be 3 different enzymes because each step is catalyzed by a specific enzyme. So for 3 steps, there will be 3 different enzymes. Okay. Here we can observe that number of metabolites are also 3, A, B, C. In linear type of metabolic pathway, we were getting 4 metabolites. But here we will get 3 metabolites because it is cyclic type of metabolic pathway. 3 metabolites, A, B, C. And intermediates is except initial substrate and final product, that is A. So except A, everything will be intermediates. 2 intermediates. B and C. So what information can be deduced? Number of steps equal to number of enzymes. Number of steps equal to number of metabolites. So this second step is different for cyclic type of metabolic path. In linear type, it was number of steps plus 1. We were getting number of metabolites. But here, number of steps equal to number of metabolites. Number of steps minus 1 equal to number of intermediates. And it is same for linear as well as cyclic type of metabolic pathway. So from this information, we can now easily solve this question. In question, it is mentioned 18 steps. So if there are 18 steps, 18 enzymes will be present, specific enzymes. Number of steps equal to number of metabolites. So 18 metabolites will be present. Number of steps minus 1. That is 18 minus 1 will be 17 intermediates will be present in a cyclic type of metabolic pathway consisting of 18 steps. 17 intermediates. In the question, number of metabolites are asked. The correct answer will be 18. Correct option will be first. Okay. Now, such type of questions, this type of question is not asked till now. Okay. But it can be asked in the upcoming exams. Okay. So, without understanding these two terms, that is metabolites and intermediates, student cannot solve this question accurately or correctly. Okay. Now you will be able to solve it correctly. Trick for cyclic metabolic pathway. Number of steps equal to number of enzymes involved. Because each step will be catalyzed by a specific enzyme. Number of steps equal to number of metabolites. This second point is different for cyclic. In linear type of metabolic pathway, number of steps plus 1, we were getting number of metabolites. Okay. Number of steps minus 1, we will get number of intermediates. The first and third point is same for linear and cyclic type of metabolic pathway. Second point is different. Okay. So again, I'm saying you don't need to remember these tricks. If you get such question, you can always draw simple metabolic pathway, whichever type is asked in the question, and then you can deduce these things and you can apply in the question to get to an answer. Okay. Now we will look anabolism and catabolism. Whenever the term catabolism is asked, it simply means degradation. And whenever a term anabolism is asked, it means formation. These two terms are very much important, and examiners ask this frequently because student gets confused between these two terms. Okay. Catabolism simply means degradation of complex molecules into simpler molecules. Due to this degradation, energy will get generated. Okay. It is an exergonic process. It will release heat. Such process in which heat is released is known as exergonic process. The best example is respiration, which we have been studying through from 8th standard. That is respiration, in which there is breakdown or oxidation of glucose molecule into simpler molecules. And we know that complete oxidation of glucose, after complete oxidation of glucose, energy in the form of ATP will be generated. Okay. So catabolism simply means degradation of complex molecules into simpler molecules, whereas in anabolism it is formation of complex molecules from simpler molecules. So if these are simpler molecules, there will be formation of complex molecules. For this, it will utilize or consume energy, and in this, heat will not be released. Best example is photosynthesis, which you have been studying from 8th standard. In photosynthesis, from simple inorganic molecules like carbon dioxide, in the presence of light and chlorophyll, we were getting carbohydrate or glucose. Okay. So from simple inorganic precursor molecules like carbon dioxide, in the presence of light and chlorophyll, we will get glucose. Okay. So from simple molecule complex molecule formation is going to occur in anabolic pathway. Okay. Next point is some pathway can be either catabolic or anabolic type. So some pathway can follow both catabolic as well as anabolic type, and it depends on the physiological state. It depends on the physiological state, and all those pathway which can follow either catabolic or anabolic type are referred to as amphibolic pathway. Best example is TCA cycle or Krebs cycle. This is important point you need to remember. A question can be asked in your exam: which of the following pathway is of amphibolic type? So the correct answer will be Krebs cycle. Okay. So this is also very important slide. Let me draw a simple linear type of metabolic pathway. So here A is getting converted into D in 3 steps. This is first, this is second, and this is third. Each metabolic pathway has first committed step or irreversible step. And irreversible means the change in free energy is large negative, and thus reaction can proceed in forward direction and not in backward direction. Now we will not understand free energy in much depth over here. We will understand that when we will study thermodynamics in detail. For now, you just need to understand 2 points. When the value of free energy is negative, reaction will favor in forward direction only. Forward direction. And if the value of free energy is positive, it will favor, chemical reaction will favor in backward direction. So just you have to understand these 2 points for now. In the irreversible step, the value of free energy is large negative. Okay. So if this is irreversible step, if this is irreversible step and the value of free energy is large negative, reaction will favor in forward direction and not in backward direction. It will favor in forward direction. Okay. So these 2 points are important. And the third point is basic metabolic pathways in most organisms are identical. So you have to remember this point. It can be asked in the options as it is. For example, in CSIR net part C question, you may get it in your option that in most organisms basic metabolic pathways are identical. So this is correct statement. Okay. Let us move to the next slide. Regulation of metabolic pathway. Regulation is very important. Okay. Feedback inhibition means accumulation of an end product of a metabolic pathway inhibits an enzyme catalyzing one of the reactions, usually first reaction of the pathway. Here, initial substrate is A and final product is D. When the amount of end product increase or when end product accumulates, it will simply inhibit first enzyme or first step. It will usually inhibit first enzyme or first step, but it can also inhibit second step, third step. Okay. So in the question, if it is asked that end product will inhibit which step or which enzyme by feedback inhibition, the answer should be first, second, third. But if in the question it is asked end product will usually inhibit or commonly inhibit or frequently inhibit which step of the metabolic pathway, the answer will be first step. So it depends on the wording of the question, what is asked. If it is asked in feedback inhibition, which step is typically, which step is commonly, which step is usually, typically, commonly inhibited, the answer will be first step or first enzyme. Otherwise, the answer will be first, second, third. So it depends on the wording of the question. Okay. The end product D can bind to allosteric site of an enzyme E1, which may cause conformational change in E1 enzyme, and this will interfere with the binding of substrate with the enzyme in the active site of E1 enzyme. So let us try to understand what this means with below diagram. Okay. So initially we can observe that in E1 enzyme, I have shown semicircular active site and circular substrate which can bind into the active site. Okay. And the site different from the active site is known as allosteric site. Okay. So when the amount or when the levels of end product D increase, it will bind to the allosteric site of an enzyme, due to which it will cause conformational change in the enzyme, due to which active site conformation will change, as shown that initially it was semicircular and then it is of triangular shape. So due to this, circular substrate cannot bind to the active site. Because of this, enzyme E1 will be inactive, and if enzyme E1 will be inactive, A will not get converted into B, B will not get converted into C, C will not get converted into D. Okay, we will understand this in more detail. Initially, when A will get converted into D, levels of D or end product will rise. Again, this metabolic pathway will occur. A will get converted into D. D levels will further rise. And suppose that it rises significantly. So when there is increased level of end product D, it will send signal that there is time to stop synthesize end product D, because levels of end product are in huge amount now, and now there is no need to synthesize end product because it is sufficient now. It is sufficient now, right? So there is no need to synthesize it. So it will send signal that there is time to stop synthesizing me or end product D. And this signal is simply known as feedback inhibition. Okay. So when the level of end product or when the amount of end product increases significantly, it will bind to the allosteric site of an E1 enzyme. It will cause conformational change in E1 enzyme, due to which active site conformation will also change, due to which substrate cannot bind to the E1 enzyme, E1 enzyme's active site, due to which E1 enzyme will get inactive. If E1 enzyme will get inactive, A will not get converted into B, B will not get converted into C, and C will not get converted into D. So gradually, the levels of D will start to decline or start to decrease. So as this continue, again levels of D will decline or decrease significantly. And once the levels of end products are very much low, if they are very much low, they cannot bind to allosteric site of enzyme E1. If it cannot bind to the allosteric site, there will be no conformational change in enzyme, no conformational change in active site. If there is no conformational change in active site, substrate can bind to the enzyme's active site, due to which enzyme 1 will be active. And once the enzyme 1 is active, it can again synthesize D, that is end product. So again the level of end product or the amount of end product will start to rise. Okay. So from this we can understand that everything should be controlled. Even vitamins the vitamin levels should be in proper amount. Okay, if the vitamin levels are very much low or very much high, it will create or it will generate imbalance in the body. Okay, or it can have side effects. Okay, so everything in the body should be maintained. The level should be maintained. Neither it should be very much low nor it should be very much high. It should be in controlled or regulated manner. Okay, the next way by which metabolic pathway can be regulated is by feedback repression. End product of a metabolic pathway prevents the synthesis of an enzyme catalyzing one of the reactions of the pathway. It occurs at gene level. End product can combine with DNA and prevent the transcription and translation thereby preventing enzyme synthesis. Now you need to understand two slight difference between feedback inhibition and feedback repression. Feedback inhibition does not occur at gene level, and feedback inhibition end product will inhibit first enzyme or first step. But in feedback repression, it occurs at gene level, and end product will not directly inhibit enzyme. It will not directly inhibit enzyme, but it will prevent the synthesis of enzyme. It will prevent the synthesis of enzyme by preventing the transcription and translation of enzyme E1. So in the below diagram, you can observe that end product D can bind to a specific region of a DNA, due to which it will prevent the transcription and translation of E1 enzyme. So in feedback inhibition, end product will inhibit the enzyme, whereas in feedback repression, end product D will stop the production of enzyme E1. It will not inhibit. It will just stop the production of E1, or it will stop the synthesis of enzyme E1 by preventing the transcription and translation of E1 enzyme. That is, feedback repression occurs at gene level. So you may get question from this, because many students still think that feedback inhibition and feedback repression are same. So there is high chance that you may get question from these two terms. Okay, and it's very simple. Okay, I think this was the last slide. Yes, this was the last slide. Now many students were asking me whether to study metabolic pathway in detail for exam. So my suggestion would be that instead of investing much time to study metabolic pathways, you can invest your time to study different units or different chapters like enzyme kinetics, protein, thermodynamics, and pH numericals, which are very much scoring. Okay, from metabolic pathways, you cannot assure that you can attempt the question correctly. It can be asked in very much depth, and it is not easy to remember so many cycles, metabolic pathways, regulation of metabolic pathways. Okay, it's not very much easy, and the syllabus is also vast of all 13 units. Okay, in CSIR NET exam, and the weightage of metabolic pathways is very much less. It is of 6 marks in CSIR NET exam. You will get one question from part C of 4 marks and one question from part B of 2 marks. In different exams like MH, Maharashtra State LifeScience, JNU, DBT, JRF, the weightage is very less. Okay, you can skip this metabolic pathway chapter for your exam. But if you are studying for BSc and MSc theory exam or university exam, you can always refer to my videos. Okay, they'll be helpful for you. And if you observe or if you read different books, you will find that all the books will have different information. So you don't need to read every information from every reference book. because such information, that is information in that much depth, will not be asked in the exam. For example, reference book number 1 has one particular information, reference book number 2 has separate information, reference book number 3 has other specific information. Such questions will not be asked. But if 10 reference book has common information, then that information becomes very much important. Since it is common, which means it is important. And from that common information, you need to select more important information which have been previously asked in the previous year exams. So we need to smartly study. Okay, we need to do smart work and not hard work. Both are required, but smart work is very much required because this is not CET exam, this is PhD entrance exam and the syllabus is vast. So you need to study very much smartly by analyzing previous year question papers. Slowly you will understand what information is important and what information is not important. Okay, so you can practice previous year questions. Okay, and you can also revise my lectures which will help you to solve difficult part C questions. Okay, so I hope this lecture was helpful for you. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.